Every amusement park has a last day. The last day the roller coaster ran with passengers. The last night the lights came on. The last family that walked through the gate, bought their tickets, ate their candy floss, and went home not knowing they were the last ones. Nobody announces the last day. Nobody knows it's happening. The park just stops, and then the vines start. Today we're going inside 6 of the world's most significant abandoned amusement parks. Not for the decay, not for the ghost story atmosphere, but for what each one tells us about the place and moment in history that built it. Because amusement parks are not just entertainment. They are statements. They are investments. They are a civilization saying, we have enough surplus, enough money, enough stability, enough optimism to build a place whose entire purpose is joy. When that place is abandoned, something else is being said, and that something else is always worth listening to. In 1969, the East German government opened Kulturpark Plannerwald on the banks of the Spree River in East Berlin. East Germany was building socialism. That meant leisure was political. A thriving amusement park wasn't just entertainment. It was proof that the socialist state delivered happiness. The park ran for 20 years under state management. At its peak, it drew 1.7 million visitors annually. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 and reunification swept through Germany, the park survived the transition. It was privatized in 1991, renamed Spreepark. But the economics of post-reunification Berlin were brutal. Visitor numbers collapsed as competition arrived. Costs rose. The new owner, Norbert Witt, struggled to keep the park profitable. In 2001, Witt dismantled 6 of the park's rides, loaded them onto a container ship, and relocated to Lima, Peru, to start a new park there. The Peru venture failed. The ride sat in Lima harbor. Then things got considerably worse. German customs discovered that the dismantled ride parts shipped to Peru contained 167 kilograms of cocaine hidden inside. Witt's son was arrested in Peru. Witt himself was eventually convicted in Germany. The park closed. Nobody came to collect it. For years, the Ferris wheel kept slowly turning, powered by wind alone, rusting in the trees above the Spree. Berlin eventually acquired the site. Today it is being restored as an arts and culture park. The Ferris wheel still stands. The dinosaur sculptures still stand in the trees. Spreepark is the story of what happens when the ideology that built something collapses, and the economics that replace it don't fit. In 1961, Nara Dreamland opened in the ancient Japanese city of Nara. It was, transparently and unapologetically, a copy of Disneyland. The main entrance castle, the themed lands, the parade route, the monorail. Every major feature had a direct Disneyland parallel. The story goes that the park's developers approached Walt Disney himself about a licensing deal in the late 1950s. Disney declined, so they built their version anyway. For 45 years, Nara Dreamland worked. Japan didn't have a Disney park, and Nara Dreamland filled the gap. Generations of Japanese children rode its roller coasters and posed with its characters. Then, in 1983, Tokyo Disneyland opened. The real thing had arrived. Nara Dreamland's attendance began declining steadily. Year by year, visitor numbers fell. Attractions were not updated. The infrastructure aged. In 2006, after a final season of diminishing returns, Nara Dreamland closed. What makes it remarkable is what happened next. Almost nothing. The park was left almost entirely intact for 10 years. No one stripped the rides. No one demolished the buildings. The roller coaster sat on its tracks. The carousel sat on its platform. The castle sat at the end of the main street. Urban explorers who accessed the site in that decade photographed a park, frozen in time. Dust on every surface, weeds pushing through every crack. But the bones of something that once worked entirely preserved. Demolition eventually came in 2016. It took them most of a year to take down what had taken a decade to abandon. 40 kilometers north of Beijing, in the Xinjiang village area of Hebei province, you can still see, or could, until recently, the ruins of what was meant to be. The largest amusement park in Asia, Wonderland. Construction began in 1998. The ambition was explicit. It would outscale Disneyland. European-style castle, full themed zones, infrastructure for millions of visitors annually. An entire new city of entertainment in the hinterland north of Beijing. Construction stopped in 1998. Land disputes between the development company and local farmers could not be resolved. Funding dried up. The project stalled. And then just stayed stalled. For the next 15 years, the concrete skeleton of Wonderland sat in the fields. Half-built castle towers, steel framework, poured foundations, with nothing on top of them. And around the ruins, farmers using the cleared land for crops, planting corn between the abandoned footings. The image became famous. Chinese agriculture growing through the bones. A failed capitalist spectacle. Farmers harvesting crops in the shadow of a castle that was never finished. In 2013, construction briefly resumed. New investors, new ambitions. It stopped again within months. The site was eventually cleared and the ruins demolished. Wonderland is the story of what happens when economic ambition outpaces everything else. The legal framework, the funding, the planning. A monument to growth that stalled before it could become anything. On August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall near New Orleans. The storm surge that followed flooded the Six Flags New Orleans amusement park, which had closed for the season just days earlier, with 7 feet of water, and sat there for weeks. When the water receded, the park was devastated. Twisted metal, dead equipment, saltwater corrosion throughout every mechanical system. Six Flags filed for bankruptcy in 2009. The New Orleans land lease was rejected. The city of New Orleans acquired the site. And then nothing happened. For 2 decades, Six Flags New Orleans has sat on 140 acres of prime New Orleans real estate. As one of the most documented abandoned sites in the United States. The roller coasters are still there. The flat rides are still there. The signs are still there, though the storm stripped most of the color. Various redevelopment plans have been proposed and collapsed. A movie studio, a mixed-use development, a new theme park. As of now, the rides still stand. Six Flags New Orleans is not just the story of a hurricane. It's the story of what happens after the cameras leave. The failure of insurance, of corporate responsibility, of city planning, of political will to address what the storm left behind. The park is a 20-year monument to what wasn't rebuilt. This one is unlike all the others. Pripyat was the city built to house the workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. 50,000 people. A young city. The average age was 26. A functional, thriving Soviet town with schools, hospitals, sports facilities, and a cultural center. In April 1986, the city was preparing for its annual Spring Festival. As part of the celebrations, a new amusement park had been built. A Ferris wheel, bumper cars, carnival rides, scheduled to open on May 1st. On April 26th, reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. Soviet authorities, in the hours and days that followed, maintained public order by insisting the situation was under control. Part of maintaining that fiction was keeping life in Pripyat as normal as possible. The amusement park was opened on April 27th, 1 day early. Children rode the bumper cars. Families visited the Ferris wheel. The park ran for a single day. On April 28th, Pripyat was evacuated. Residents were told to take enough. For 3 days. They never returned. The amusement park froze on April 28th, 1986. The Ferris wheel, never properly broken in, never properly used, became one of the most photographed images of the entire Chernobyl disaster. Not a reactor, not a fire. A yellow Ferris wheel, still and silent. In an empty city, on a spring day that never ended. Not every abandoned park collapses in a single dramatic moment. Some simply run out of time. Joyland Amusement Park opened in Wichita, Kansas in 1949. It was a classic American roadside park. The whip, the merry-go-round. A wooden roller coaster called the Nightmare, a funhouse, a carousel. For decades, it was a fixture of Kansas summer childhood. Multiple generations of Wichita families marked their summers by Joyland. But the economics of the American roadside park were changing. Disney had redefined what an amusement park was supposed to be. The era of the small, family-owned park accessible by car on a summer afternoon was ending. Maintenance costs rose. Insurance rose. Attendance fell. Joyland changed ownership multiple times through the 1990s. There was a fire. There was an arson investigation. The park opened and closed and opened again. In 2004, it closed for what the owners called a temporary season. It never reopened. The Nightmare roller coaster stood for years, untouched, slowly being consumed by the Kansas weather. Eventually, sections of the structure were stabilized by preservation advocates who'd ridden it as children. Joyland is the story without a villain. No hurricane, no nuclear disaster, no cocaine in the roller coasters. Just time. Just the slow, irreversible maths of a business model that the world had quietly decided it no longer needed. 6 parks. 6 completely different stories. Spreepark tells you about the collision between ideology and economics when the Cold War ended. Nara Dreamland tells you about the gap between ambition and the real thing, and what happens when the real thing finally arrives. Wonderland China tells you about economic growth that moves faster than the legal and social infrastructure meant to support it. Six Flags New Orleans tells you about the long aftermath of disaster, when the cameras and the sympathy have moved on. Pripyat tells you about the cost of maintaining a fiction, when the truth is catastrophic. Joyland tells you about the slow, quiet death of an entire category of American life that nobody announced and nobody quite mourned until it was already gone. An amusement park is an expression of optimism. It says, we have enough. We are stable enough. We can afford joy. When that expression is left to rot, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a question, what happened to the enough? What happened to the stability? What happened to the belief that the future was worth building for? There's a ticket booth at the entrance of Joyland in Wichita. The prices are still listed. The slot where you'd push your money through is still there. The booth is faded, but the structure holds. Nobody used it after 2004, but it's ready. Every abandoned park has something like that. A detail that suggests the place expected to continue. A ride safety sign still insisting guests must be this tall. A concession stand menu still advertising a hot dog price from 20 years ago. These places weren't built to be ruins. They were built to be used. Summer after summer, generation after generation. The abandonment is the accident. The park is the intention. And in that gap, between what was intended and what actually happened, is where the history lives. 6 parks. 6 last days nobody knew were last days. 6 different reasons the ride stopped. And in every case, the same question underneath. What did it take to build this? And what did it take to lose it?